Esteban remembered that fateful day in great detail, as if it happened yesterday and not 19 years ago. A lot had changed in the man's life in that time, but he still believed that he could figure out what happened. 19 years ago, 6-year-old Esteban Rojas was fishing with his father, Gustavo. The road ran through a dense jungle. It was so uneven and winding that the boy simply got tired of turning his head in different directions. Esteban had never been in this part of the forest, which loomed over the road like a majestic green mass. At some point, Gustavo went over the speed limit and lost control of the car. The pickup truck overturned and fell into a ditch. Everything happened so quickly that little Esteban didn't have time to realize what was happening. A sharp push, then a blow, and everything went haywire in the boy's head. That's all Esteban could remember about the accident itself. When the boy woke up, his father wasn't around, while the boy was lying in the car, which had turned upside down and was badly damaged. Fortunately, Esteban wasn't injured and escaped only with a couple of minor bruises. Seeing that his father was nowhere to be found, the boy got out of the car and looked around. Esteban was surrounded by a dense jungle on all sides. It was both frightening and fascinating. Having found his backpack, the boy decided to explore the area. At first, Esteban tried not to go too far away from the car and kept it in sight at all times. But then the boy got bolder and went further into the jungle than he should have. Esteban was sure that he was going straight the whole time, but in fact, he went a bit to the left and lost his way. Now, the boy was having trouble finding the car since he'd lost sight of the path he'd originally been on. Esteban wandered through the dense thickets for several hours, after which he finally came out to a river. The boy had a couple of sandwiches in his backpack, which his mother had prepared for him before he went fishing. It was thanks to this simple food that Esteban managed to last a couple more days. When he ran out of food, the boy realized that he didn't have anyone to count on but himself. Several days had passed since the accident, but no one seemed to be looking for him. Where is my dad? He couldn't have disappeared without a trace, little Esteban thought, wandering along the shore. The only thing that saved the boy was the fact that he didn't give in to panic and managed to stay in control of his emotions. At night, he climbed a tree and slept there, fearing the attack of predators. During the day, he walked along the river, hoping to reach the city. Unfortunately, Esteban didn't know that instead of heading for civilization, he was going in the opposite direction. Even an adult could easily get lost in the dense jungles of northeast Argentina, let alone a 6-year-old boy. Unwittingly, Esteban went so deep into the jungle that it was simply impossible to get out without outside help. What happened a little later could only be called a miracle. Exhausted, the boy came across some fishermen who lived in a village located in the heart of the jungle. Having noticed the little boy heading towards them, the men couldn't believe their eyes at first. Without asking any questions, one of the fishermen picked up the boy and hurried for the village. The local healer turned out to be a professional in her field and rather quickly prepared a potion to make sure that the little traveler's bruises would no longer cause him discomfort. And after the fisherman's sister fed Esteban a delicious dinner, the boy started feeling better. Of course, the boy immediately told the villagers about what had happened and how he lost his father. The villagers found the story of little Esteban truly shocking. They understood that if the boy hadn't stumbled upon the fisherman's camp, he would have most likely died soon. The problem was that it would be very hard to return the boy to his hometown. First of all, the rainy season was approaching, which meant that any movement in the forest needed to be minimized. And secondly, the villagers lived in their own religious community, which virtually excluded any contact with people from the outside world. They didn't keep Esteban as prisoner, and the boy could leave the village at any moment. However, the boy was so tired from all the wandering that he decided to start off by getting enough rest and only then think about making any decisions. Esteban was invited to stay with the fisherman Santiago, who was actually the one who saved him on the shore. The fisherman's wife died a few years ago, leaving him a childless widower. Santiago couldn't marry again, although he'd always dreamed of having a son. When the fisherman saw Esteban on the riverbank, he decided that it was a gift from God for all the lonely years and all the hardships. Having surrounded the boy with care and attention, Santiago took on the role of his father, who was never found. Having decided to stay in the village for a while, Esteban actually stayed there for 19 years. During this time, he learned to fish, weave nets, and make boats from tree trunks. The villagers had long started thinking of Esteban as a member of their religious community and valued him for his hard work and kind heart. By the time he turned 24, the young man was taking care not only of his elderly father, but also of his fiancée. Looking at his stately and strong son, Santiago couldn't be happier over the fact that fate had given him such a gift 19 years ago. Esteban had been courting the daughter of the local leader and was hoping to marry her in the near future. Dolores was a modest, sensual young woman whose face reminded Esteban of his mother. Unfortunately, after so many years spent in the fishing village, Esteban could barely remember his parents anymore. Of course, he still loved his mom and dad, but at a distance and so many years later, it wasn't the same kind of love that family members have for each other when they live together. Dolores knew her fiancé's story and therefore supported him in every possible way. Esteban felt how much she cared for him and tried to be just as compassionate and kind. During all those years, Esteban couldn't get rid of the thoughts about his father. What happened to Gustavo Rojas? Did he, like his son, get lost in the jungle, after which he became a victim of some forest predators? No one could answer this question except Gustavo himself, provided that he managed to survive, of course. Esteban had been remembering his father more and more often recently. He still couldn't understand how the man could have just vanished into thin air. I think my father's alive. He couldn't have just disappeared without a trace. I need to go to the scene of the accident and take a look around, Esteban said at dinner. Dolores looked anxiously at her fiancé, but didn't try to dissuade him. The young woman understood that Esteban needed to figure out what happened to his father in order to accept his past. That was why Dolores packed enough food for the man to last 3 days, as well as a warm blanket for spending the night in the jungle, which at this time of year was quite cool. Having said goodbye to his fiancée, Esteban got going. In all the 19 years, the man had never once been to that part of the jungle where he and his father got into that accident. The most interesting thing was that Esteban remembered the way perfectly well, as if there was a built-in GPS in his head. Having spotted the rusted pickup truck, the young man started feeling all kinds of things. On the one hand, Esteban was glad that he managed to find the scene of the accident, but on the other hand, he was forced to relive everything that happened 19 years ago. First of all, the young man decided to explore the interior of the car, which was quite well preserved thanks to the fact that the windows didn't break in the accident. Having examined the contents of the glove compartment, Esteban found 2 envelopes wrapped in cellophane for greater safety. What is this? The man thought, tearing open the package. As it turned out later, there were 2 letters in the envelopes, one of which was addressed to Gustavo Rojas. Having read the first letter, Esteban turned pale and clutched his head. The man was truly shocked. The letter was written by Esteban's mother. She accused her husband of numerous affairs and betrayal. The second letter was written by Gustavo Rojas. The man wrote that he was tired of raising someone else's son and that he intended to leave the boy in the jungle. His father's confession shocked Esteban even more than his mother's letter. After all, he never even suspected that Gustavo married his mother when she was already pregnant. Esteban's father died in an accident on the river, and Gustavo decided to help the young widow and gave her son his last name. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that Gustavo deliberately set up the accident in order to get rid of Esteban, who, according to the letter, prevented him from living his life the way he wanted to. That day, Gustavo cried for nearly the first time in his life. The realization of the terrible truth destroyed the ghostly world that he had built for himself over these 19 years. Having returned to the village, Esteban told his fiancée and Santiago everything he had learned. Then the young man decided to find his mother and invite her to his wedding. He decided to forget all about Gustavo Rojas. He didn't want anything to do with someone who was so terrible. Esteban managed to find his mother eventually and apologized profusely for failing to do so sooner. Despite being a great liar and having extensive connections in the mayor's office, Gustavo still failed to avoid facing punishment. The case of the resurrected Esteban received wide publicity, and it was simply impossible to hush it up. The public condemned Gustavo's actions and demanded the most severe punishment for him. Having found his mother, Esteban returned to the village where he married Dolores in accordance with all the local customs. It later turned out that she was already pregnant at the time. Looking at this happy family, the fisherman Santiago couldn't hold back his tears, never ceasing to thank heaven for giving him the chance to not only become a father, but also a beloved grandfather.